She got caught cheating, and her first words were, "This is your fault for not giving me enough attention." I replied, "You're absolutely right." Then, I gave her all the attention she deserved from my attorney, the locksmith, and the process server. Her shock when she realized what I meant. I never expected my return home to unfold like this. It was supposed to be a simple surprise. Early flight. A cancelled connection. And then I rebooked on an earlier one, to make it back before dinner. The kind of thoughtful gesture you imagine. It would bring a smile. Not the cold, bitter taste of betrayal. I hadn't texted her. I thought the surprise would be perfect. Her favorite Thai place. The one we hadn't visited in months. I imagined walking through the door, taking in the familiar scent of the house, setting down the takeout on the table, and her smiling, relieved that her husband was finally home. But when I opened the bedroom door, the scene that greeted me couldn't have been further from my expectations. So, there they were. My wife and her personal trainer. My wife, the woman I had loved for over a decade, lying in our bed with a man I'd been paying $200 a session, twice a week, for months. Her eyes met mine for the briefest of moments before the trainer scrambled to cover himself, grabbing his clothes and running out the door like he was being chased by a lion. I stood frozen for what felt like an eternity. The shock taking over, trying to process what I was seeing. And there she was. My wife, sitting up in bed, looking at me, with the kind of expression that was impossible to read. But there was no guilt. No apology. Just that cold, detached look as if I was the one who had done something wrong. "Get out," I told the trainer, my voice calm, eerily so. I didn't shout. I didn't move too fast. I just stood there, like I was watching the scene unfold from somewhere far off. He didn't need to be told twice. The front door slammed shut behind him. Barely 15 seconds later. Then, it was just the two of us. She opened her mouth, and I expected the usual. Tears. Apologies. Begging. Something to show she cared. Something to break the tension. But no. Instead, she looked at me, almost accusingly, and said, "This is your fault." I blinked. "Excuse me." "You heard me," she repeated, her voice more desperate now. "This is your fault for not giving me enough attention. You're always working, always traveling. When's the last time you actually looked at me? When's the last time you made me feel wanted?" The audacity. The absolute audacity of this woman. The woman I had supported. The one I'd built a life with. Suddenly blaming me for the choices she had made. I could have screamed. Could have thrown things. I could have done 1,000 different things to make her feel the hurt I was starting to feel. To let her see how angry I was. But something inside me snapped, and I realized it wouldn't help. She would just twist it into something else. Something that would turn around and bite me later. Instead, I took a breath. "You're absolutely right," I said, almost too calmly. "I haven't been giving you enough attention." She blinked, confusion flashing across her face. I don't think she expected me to agree. She opened her mouth to say something, but I wasn't interested in what she had to say. "That changes today," I told her. Then turned and walked out of the room. I heard her calling after me, asking what I meant. But I didn't answer. I just grabbed my keys, walked out the front door, and got into my car. The drive to the hotel was mechanical. Like I was on autopilot. I checked in, got the room key, and sat down on the bed, feeling nothing. I pulled out my phone, and started making calls. First, to a divorce attorney. My buddy from college had gone through this, and recommended someone who handled these cases efficiently. I left a message explaining the situation, asking for the earliest consultation possible. Second, I called a locksmith. I scheduled him for 8 in the morning, knowing that my wife would be taking the kids to her mother's. I was going to take back control of my life, and that house was mine, whether she realized it or not. Finally, I called my brother. I needed a place to crash for a few days while I figured things out. He didn't ask many questions. Just told me to stay as long as I needed. Then, I sat there in that hotel room, eating cold Thai food alone, and started planning. My wife was going to get all the attention she deserved. But not the way she expected. I checked into the hotel and dropped my bags onto the bed. The room smelled faintly of cleaning products. A mix of disinfectant and something floral, trying to mask the harshness of the place. I felt nothing. Empty. Numb. The shock had worn off, replaced by a cold clarity. There was no room for anger right now. No time for the raw emotions that were still simmering beneath the surface. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started making calls. I didn't waste a moment. I needed to act fast. The first call went to the divorce attorney. My friend from college had recommended someone. I wasn't sure what to expect. But I left a message anyway, laying out the basics, my wife's infidelity, my plans, and my need for legal advice. The words felt strange in my mouth, but they were necessary. I needed to get ahead of this. Next, I called the locksmith. I knew exactly when my wife would be gone. The kids would be with her mother. She'd drop them off. Likely already in her own little world, avoiding the mess she'd created. I set the appointment for 8 in the morning, sharp. I wanted the locks changed by the time she came back. Every door, every lock, every possible point of entry would be altered. My house, my rules. Then, I called my brother. I didn't ask, I just told him I needed a place to crash. He didn't ask questions. Just agreed without hesitation. He didn't need to know everything. I didn't even want to explain. I needed space. And he was always the one I could count on when things went sideways. The phone calls made, I sat back on the bed, looking around the sterile hotel room. The walls were bland. The furniture was generic. And there was nothing about it that made me feel like I belonged. But that was the point. I didn't belong there. I didn't belong in this situation, in this life anymore. Not with her. Not with this mess. I picked up the cold Thai food they had delivered earlier. It was the same place I had planned to take her. The same dish she loved. But now, the food just tasted like cardboard, bland and unappealing. I shoved a bite in my mouth, chewing mechanically. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered except getting through this. The plan was clear. I couldn't let her manipulate the situation. She thought she was the victim, that she could blame everything on me. But no. This was her mess. She'd made this bed. And now it was time to deal with the consequences. I spent the next hour making sure I had everything lined up. Divorce attorney's contact info. Locksmith's details. The plan for the kids. Everything needed to be handled in the right order, with precision. No room for mistakes. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. My mind kept replaying the scene. Her words. Her blaming me. But it was different now. I wasn't going to let her rewrite this story. She could blame me all she wanted. The truth was I had been paying attention. Too much attention. I had been paying attention to the wrong things for too long. Letting my career consume me. Letting her drift further away. But this was the wake up call I needed. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The harsh hotel light, casting long shadows in the corners. It felt like the beginning of something. Maybe the end of something, too. But one thing was clear. This was my moment to take back control. Tomorrow, I would make sure she got the attention she so desperately wanted. But it wouldn't be from me. It would be from my attorney, the locksmith, and the process server. I knew exactly what to do. She wasn't going to win this. Not this time. And for the first time since walking into that bedroom, I felt a small spark of something. Not hope. Not yet. But maybe. Maybe I could finally take control of my own life. I woke up the next morning to the sound of my phone buzzing. The locksmith was scheduled for 8. And it was already 6:30. I stretched and stared at the ceiling for a moment. The weight of everything still hanging heavy in the air. But I didn't have time to dwell. There was a plan in motion. And it had to be executed perfectly. I got dressed quickly. Throwing on an old shirt and jeans. I didn't need anything fancy. My focus was sharp now, laser, focused on the tasks ahead. The moment I stepped outside, the cold morning air hit me. But it didn't faze me. I was numb. But in a way that felt right. Like I was stepping into a new version of myself. One who didn't get caught up in emotional chaos. But instead took action. One step at a time. I drove to the house in silence. The car radio off. The road stretching out. Ahead of me. Like an endless horizon. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw the locksmith's van already parked. He was an older man, probably in his 60s. With a grizzled face and a no-nonsense attitude. I nodded at him. And he didn't need to ask any questions. We got to work immediately, changing every lock in the house. The garage, the front door, the back door. Every single point of entry. I wasn't leaving anything to chance. The sound of the key turning in the locks was oddly satisfying. It felt like I was locking away everything that had happened in the past, securing myself from what was coming next. I kept my focus as I worked alongside the locksmith, making sure every detail was in place. The house, my house, was going to be mine again. At about 11:30, I received a text from my wife. The message was brief. Why is the door locked? What did you do? I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I took a moment, letting the silence settle in around me. When I did respond, I kept it simple. Everything goes through the attorneys now. Her reply came quickly. Are you serious? You can't just do this. I didn't respond again. There was nothing more to say. I had no intention of getting dragged into another emotional conversation. Not now. Not after everything. I had made my move. And it was time to stick to the plan. Around 2 in the afternoon, I heard a knock on my brother's door. It was my wife. She had come to find me. I could hear her voice, demanding to talk. The desperation in her tone clear. Even through the door. My brother opened it. And I could almost hear the conversation. unfold. She probably begged him to let her talk to me, to convince me to come home. But my brother didn't play along. He was firm, telling her I wasn't there, and didn't want to speak to her. I could hear her getting frantic, trying to make him see reason. But my brother was unmovable. "Are you serious?" she asked, the anger rising in her voice. "I'm his wife. He can't just lock me out of my own house." "Pretty sure you lost the right to claim that after what you did in his bed," my brother shot back. The silence that followed told me everything. She didn't have a response to that. I knew. She was stunned, maybe even in shock. But that was the price she had to pay for her choices. I wasn't gonna let her twist this into something that would work in her favor. By 3 o'clock, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from her mother. My heart sank, just hearing her voice. "Why are you doing this to her?" she asked, her tone sharp, accusing. "This isn't fair. She made a mistake. You need to fix this, for the sake of your family." I didn't hesitate. She tore this family apart when she made her choices. When she decided our bed was a place for someone else to lie in, she ended it. There was a long pause on the other end. Then, "She's devastated. The kids are confused. You're destroying them." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "She's the one who destroyed everything. I've been working 60-hour weeks to support her and the family, and this is what I get in return." Silence. Then, "But, she's been lonely, you've neglected her." I cut her off. "She didn't tell you that she was the one who went looking for someone else? That she's been lying to me for months?" Her mother's response was a quiet, defeated sigh. "I didn't know about the affair." I paused for a moment before answering. "I'm not discussing this with you anymore. I've made my decision." And with that, I hung up. There was nothing left to say. The only thing that mattered now was protecting myself and the kids. Everything else, her guilt, her manipulation, her family's pressure, it all meant nothing. I spent the rest of the afternoon in the hotel room. The world outside still moving, but inside, I felt the weight of my decisions. I was no longer reacting to what she did. I was moving forward with my life, one step at a time. My attorney had already sent the divorce papers. That was the next step. It was time to finish what had started the day. I walked into that room. And somehow, even though the anger was still there, I felt more in control than I had in years. By the time the weekend rolled around, I felt like I had spent an eternity in limbo. My mind was focused, but my emotions were a storm waiting to break. I was still processing everything, but there was no time to waste. The divorce had officially started, and now I had to face the legal battles ahead. My attorney had already sent out the papers, and everything was moving fast. But my wife wasn't backing down. She was determined to get what she thought she deserved. She thought the affair would be swept under the rug. That somehow she could manipulate her way into getting half of everything, including my house. But she was wrong. That Monday morning, I woke up to a message from my attorney. The demand letter had arrived. My wife's lawyer had made it clear she wanted everything. The house, the kids, spousal support, the works. It was clear she was going all in. But I wasn't about to let her dictate the terms. Her lawyer's demands were laughable. She wanted the house. The one I had bought with my inheritance money long before we ever met. I had made sure to keep everything in my name. And I knew it was legally protected. The audacity to demand it back, after everything that had happened. It was almost comical. But the anger started to build again. How could she be so entitled? She thought. She could walk away with everything. Without any consequence. I picked up the phone and called my attorney. We went over the details of the letter. And I could feel my blood boil as he explained how we'd handle it. There was no way I was giving up my house. It was the one thing I had left, that was truly mine. The divorce wasn't just about her. It was about me. Too. I wasn't going to let her walk away with more than she deserved. Later that morning, the phone rang again. This time, it was her. Are you seriously going to do this? She demanded. You can't just take everything from me. You can't shut me out like this. The kids need me. I'm their mother. Her voice was shaking with emotion. But there was something about it that just didn't reach me anymore. The tears, the pleading, they felt hollow. You want to talk about the kids? I replied, my voice steady. You're the one who betrayed me. You're the one who destroyed this family. If you think I'm going to let you turn this into a circus, you're wrong. Her silence on the other end spoke volumes. She didn't know how to react to my calmness. My refusal to engage with her emotional manipulation. It was clear to me now I was no longer the man she could control with guilt. I hung up the phone and set it down on the table in front of me. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me again. But this time, I was ready for it. I wasn't gonna let her turn me into the bad guy. She had made her choices. And now she had to face the consequences. The next few days were a blur of legal paperwork, calls, and more back and forth with my attorney. But as the process unfolded, I could see how far my wife was willing to go. She wasn't just fighting for the house. She was fighting to stay in control of the narrative. To paint herself as the victim. She started telling people that I was emotionally abusive. That the affair was somehow my fault for neglecting her. It was a complete fabrication. I wasn't perfect. But I had never once been abusive, never once raised my voice to her in anger. But she was desperate. And desperation makes people do crazy things. She didn't stop there. She began to go after the kids. One evening, my daughter came to me, wide-eyed, her small voice trembling. Daddy, did you hit mommy? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt my heart stop. The air leaving my lungs. My daughter, my little girl, was asking me if I had hurt her mother. And I knew exactly where it had come from. Her grandmother. My wife's family had been poisoning her against me. Twisting the truth to fit their narrative. I knelt down to her level, my voice calm but firm. Sweetheart, I would never hurt your mother. I said. Mommy and Daddy are having grown up problems. But none of it is your fault. I've never hurt her. I promise you that. Her eyes searched mine. And for a moment, I saw the doubt in her. She was confused. She didn't understand what was happening. Why her mom was telling her these things. I held her close for a moment, then stood up and reached for my phone. I had to take action. I called my attorney the second the conversation ended. We had to stop this before it got any worse. That night, an emergency motion was filed to restrict my mother in law from discussing the divorce or making disparaging comments about either parent in front of the children. I wasn't going to let her try to turn my own kids against me. But despite all the chaos, I remained focused. The legal battle was just beginning, and I had already seen enough to know how far my wife would go to try and tear me down. But I wouldn't let her win. I couldn't. I wasn't just fighting for the house or the kids. I was fighting for my own dignity, my own future. I wasn't going to let her take that away from me. The days passed, and with each one, the tension between my wife and me escalated. The legal battle had officially begun, and I could see how far she was willing to go to make sure she wasn't left with nothing. I thought I had seen her at her worst, but I quickly learned that she had more tricks up her sleeve. She started telling anyone who would listen that I was emotionally abusive, that the affair was her way of fighting back against my controlling behavior. My own family had received her version of events, too. My sister-in-law left me a voicemail calling me a narcissist, accusing me of ruining her sister's life. Her best friend sent me a text, saying I deserved what I got for neglecting such an amazing woman. Even her mother wrote me a letter, outlining all the ways I had failed as a husband, reminding me that I was the one who pushed her into this. It was overwhelming at first. Every message, every call, felt like another blow to my already bruised ego. But, with each one, I did my best to stay calm. I forwarded everything to my attorney, who kept a meticulous record of it all. Her plan to smear me wasn't working. If anything, it was making her look worse. Still, it wasn't just the family or the friends. It was the children. That was where she hit me the hardest. One afternoon, a few days after all the calls and letters started coming in, my daughter came home from her grandmother's house, her little face twisted with confusion. She came to me, hesitated for a moment, then asked the question that cut through me like a knife. "Daddy, did you hit Mommy?" The words felt like they had ripped through everything. I froze. My blood ran cold. I had to take a second to calm myself before I said anything. I knelt down to her, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sweetheart. No. I would never hurt Mommy. Mommy and Daddy are having grown up problems, but none of it is your fault. I would never hurt her, and I would never hurt you." She looked up at me, searching my face for answers, her eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and trust. "But," Grandma said. I didn't need to hear the rest. I knew exactly who was behind this. My mother-in-law. She had been the one whispering in my daughter's ear, poisoning her against me. I could almost feel my fists clench at the thought of her trying to turn my kids against me. I kissed my daughter's forehead, pulled her into a hug, and then sent a text to my attorney. The emotional manipulation had gone too far. It was time to act. We couldn't let this go on any longer. The next morning, my attorney filed an emergency motion to restrict my mother-in-law from discussing the divorce or making any disparaging comments about me in front of the children. I couldn't let her keep doing this. The kids were too innocent, and they didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of a war that had nothing to do with them. That afternoon, my wife came by to pick up the kids. I was ready for it. She knocked on the door, and when I opened it, There she was, standing on the other side. Looking exactly like the woman I had once loved. Yet so completely different. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded. "You're just going to destroy everything. You're tearing this family apart." I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at her. This was the woman who had betrayed me. The woman who had lied. Who had spent months with her personal trainer behind my back. Who now had the audacity to accuse me of tearing the family apart. "You're the one who tore it apart," I finally said, my voice steady. "When you chose to cheat, when you blamed me for everything, you tore this family apart." "Not me. I didn't do this." "You did." She opened her mouth to argue, but I stopped her. "I don't want to hear it anymore. You made your choices. And now, I have to make mine. Everything goes through my attorney now. Don't contact me again unless it's through him." I shut the door, before she could say anything else. I wasn't going to engage in her emotional games. Not anymore. The next few days were a blur of legal battles, phone calls, and emails. Her lawyer was relentless, but I wasn't backing down. She had no claim to the house, no claim to my assets. Everything was mine, legally. But it wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about something deeper. Something that I didn't even fully understand yet. Her attempts to manipulate the people around me only made me more determined. It made me realize just how far she was willing to go to make sure I looked like the bad guy. But I wasn't going to let her succeed. Through it all, I kept my focus. I had one goal now: to make sure the kids were protected. And to get through this divorce with my dignity intact. By the end of the week, I had a clear path ahead. The emergency motion had been filed. And the judge had granted it. The kids wouldn't be subjected to any more manipulation from my ex's family. It was a small victory, but it felt good. Still, I knew the hardest part was yet to come. The fight for custody was looming. And I could already feel the tension building. But I was ready. I had to be. The following week, the divorce proceedings started to hit a new level of intensity. My wife, who had thought she could manipulate everything to her favor, began to realize that I wasn't going to just roll over and let her take everything. It was like watching a hurricane come to terms with the fact that it could no longer tear through everything in its path. Her first big move came in the form of a demand letter from her attorney. It wasn't just the house she wanted. She was going for everything. The demand for the house was expected. But then came the alimony. $8,500 a month for spousal support. The kind of money I couldn't afford. And definitely not for someone who hadn't worked in 8 years. She also wanted full custody of the kids. Plus half of my retirement accounts. It was the kind of request that made me want to scream. But I had to stay calm. I couldn't let her have the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. I forwarded the letter to my attorney, immediately. We went through each demand carefully, line by line, and he explained how much of it was nonsense. The house. Not happening. It was mine, bought with inheritance money long before we ever met. The kids. I was their father. And I was the one who had always been there. Involved in every part of their lives. The alimony request was the one that stung the most. $8,500 a month. That was more than my own mortgage payment. But I knew it was just a starting point. It was her strategy to ask for more than she realistically could get, hoping I would settle for something lower. But I wasn't gonna play her game. This was going to be a fight. And I wasn't afraid of it. That's when I realized how badly she had underestimated me. She thought I was weak, that I would give in to her manipulations, that the emotional guilt trips would work. But they didn't. And it became clear in her second demand letter. This one was more desperate. It claimed that I had abandoned the marital home, and was therefore the one at fault. It was laughable. I had never once abandoned my family. The truth was, she had left me long before that. Emotionally, at least. She had been gone for months. I didn't just let this slide. I took action. My attorney and I gathered everything we had. The texts. The photos from the security cameras showing her. And the trainer in our bed. It wasn't pretty, but it was the truth. I wasn't going to let her paint me as the villain in this story, when she was the one who had betrayed everything. Then came the emotional toll. My wife was spiraling now, trying to salvage what was left of her reputation. She started telling everyone that I had been emotionally abusive, that the affair had been her defense against my controlling behavior. It was an insult. And it hit me like a freight train. Her sister called me a narcissist on voicemail. Her best friend texted me that I deserve everything I was going through for neglecting such a wonderful woman. Even her mother sent me a letter outlining all the ways I had failed as a husband, suggesting I needed to look at my own behavior before pointing fingers. But what struck me the most was the impact it was having on the kids. I could see the confusion in their eyes. Every time they came home from a visit at her mother's house, they were hearing things, being fed lies. And that was the breaking point for me. My daughter, my sweet little girl, came home one weekend and asked me the question I had feared the most. Daddy, did you hit mommy? My heart stopped. The words felt like a slap in the face. I had been so focused on keeping it together that I hadn't even considered what they were hearing from her family. It wasn't just the affair that hurt. It was this. The fact that she was poisoning my kids against me, trying to turn them into pawns in her emotional game. I knelt down, my hands shaking as I took her tiny face in my hands. I had to be careful with my words. I couldn't let her doubt me. Couldn't let her believe the lies. Sweetheart, I said, my voice soft but firm. I would never hurt mommy. I've never hit her, and I never will. Mommy and daddy have grown-up problems. But it's not your fault. None of it is your fault. I saw the confusion in her eyes. But I also saw the trust. She nodded slowly, the doubt in her eyes beginning to fade. But that moment stayed with me, gnawing at me, making me realize just how deep my wife's manipulation had gone. I didn't waste any time. I called my attorney the next morning and explained what had happened. We had to act fast. An emergency motion was filed the very next day, restricting my mother-in-law from discussing the divorce or making any disparaging comments about me in front of the kids. I wasn't about to let her keep messing with their heads, poisoning their minds. But even with all the legal moves, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. This wasn't just about the house or the kids. It was about respect. Something I had given her. Something she had thrown away, in favor of her own selfish desires. I thought back to the first time I'd walked into that bedroom, the shock of seeing her with him. But now, that anger wasn't just about the affair. It was about the life I had built, the trust that had been broken. She wasn't just trying to take the house, or the money. She was trying to take my dignity too. And I wasn't going to let her do that. The battle was just beginning. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had the upper hand now, and I was going to make sure she knew it. The court date was finally set, and with it came a wave of nervous energy. The fight for custody had begun. I had done everything I could to prepare for this moment. From keeping meticulous records of every school event I had attended to, every medical appointment, every soccer game. My attorney and I had gathered everything. My involvement in the kids' lives was undeniable. The case for my wife being the absent parent, at least in terms of their day-to-day lives, was becoming clear. I had never missed a single important moment. But she had. She tried to paint herself as the devoted mother, the one who stayed home and took care of the kids, the one who had been there for them. But the truth was different. I had watched her slowly drift away, choosing time with the nanny, the gym, and her personal trainer. Over time spent with our children, I was the one attending parent teacher conferences. I was the one at every recital. I was the one at every doctor's appointment. I knew it was going to get messy. It had to. She wasn't going to give up without a fight. But now, it felt different. The lies were starting to unravel. The day of the court hearing came. And I felt the weight of it more than I expected. I had been through hell over the past few months. But this moment, the one that would decide my children's future, felt like the most important thing in the world. I sat in the waiting room with my attorney, the silence heavy between us. I could hear the muffled voices of other couples in the hall, each with their own battles, their own dramas unfolding. The tension was palpable. My hands were shaking, and I found myself rubbing them against my legs, trying to focus, trying to calm the rising tide of anxiety in my chest. When it was finally time, my attorney gave me a reassuring nod, and we walked into the courtroom. The judge was already sitting, looking over the paperwork in front of her. My wife was already there, sitting next to her attorney. She didn't look at me. I didn't look at her. There was no need for that now. This wasn't a moment for emotional confrontation. This was a moment for facts. We went through the motions, answering questions, presenting evidence. My attorney laid out the case, my constant involvement with the kids, the fact that my wife hadn't been the one to take them to the doctor, or tend any of their extracurricular activities. The judge listened intently, taking notes. But I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread creeping over me when it was my wife's turn to present her side. I knew she was going to try and twist the narrative. She had to. She couldn't let the truth stand. But what she didn't expect was the evidence I had. When she tried to claim that she had been the primary caregiver, I pulled out the documentation from our security cameras. Footage of her and her trainer in our bed. I hadn't planned on using it in court, but it seemed fitting. The truth needed to be seen. The look on her face when she realized what I had was priceless. She faltered, stammered, and then fell silent. The evidence spoke louder than anything she could say. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the lies she had told. The lives she had tried to destroy. She couldn't escape the truth. The judge took everything into account. When it was all over, I was holding my breath, waiting for the decision. The silence in the room was deafening. And it felt like an eternity before the judge finally spoke. The verdict was clear. Primary custody was granted to me. Joint legal decision making. But the kids would be living with me. My wife would have every other weekend and Wednesday dinners. It was a win, but not one that I could celebrate. I sat there, my heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't the victory I had imagined in my head. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel relieved. I felt exhausted. The courtroom cleared out, and as I walked out into the hallway, I could hear her voice, her sharp, angry words as she turned to her attorney. "I'll make sure he regrets this," she hissed. "I'll make sure he never sees those kids again." I felt a chill run down my spine, but I didn't let it show. I couldn't. I had to stay strong for the kids, for myself. I had already lost so much. My marriage, my trust, my sense of security. But I wasn't going to lose my children. I walked out of the courthouse, the weight of everything finally starting to settle into my bones. The fight wasn't over. Far from it. But this was a significant step forward. It was a moment of clarity in the chaos. The kids were coming home with me. That was what mattered now. And, as I sat in the car, I found myself thinking about the future. Not the one I had imagined, but the one I was going to create. It was going to be hard. There were still battles to fight, wounds to heal. But I was determined. For them. For me. I wasn't going to let the past define me anymore. I was going to be there for my children. And that was enough. 1 month after the divorce was finalized, things felt different. It wasn't just the house I had kept, or the custody agreement that ensured I had the kids, most of the time. It was everything. How I saw the world, how I saw myself. I had spent so long running on autopilot, dealing with the legal mess and the emotional fallout, that I hadn't fully realized the shift that had taken place. But now, in the quiet of the morning, sitting in the empty house with my coffee, I could feel it. The kids were with their mother for the weekend, and the house felt unnervingly quiet. It wasn't the same without them. I missed their laughter, the noise, the chaos that came with being their dad. But at the same time, I knew this was the beginning of something new. Something better. For all of us. I thought about my ex. About how she had reacted when she received the final court ruling. She had cried, as expected. But I wasn't there to see it. Wasn't there to witness her regret, her remorse. It didn't matter. I wasn't looking for an apology anymore. What mattered was what came next. She had tried to make me feel guilty. About everything. About the house. About the divorce. About the kids. But I had come to realize that it wasn't my fault. I didn't break this family. She did. And now, I was left to pick up the pieces. But I wasn't broken. Far from it. As for her, things weren't looking too good. Her new life with the personal trainer had fallen apart, as quickly as it had begun. From what I heard, he had moved away, leaving her behind. The excitement wasn't all it was cracked up to be. The lifestyle she had gotten used to. The luxury. The easy living. None of it was going to come with him. She had to deal with the fallout on her own now. I wasn't going to feel sorry for her. I couldn't. She had made her choices. Now, she had to live with them. I checked in with my attorney a few times over the month to make sure everything was proceeding smoothly with the alimony and child support payments. She had tried to contest it at first, but everything was in order. My 401k had taken a hit, sure. But that was the price of the marriage, the price of everything we had built together. The house was mine, and the kids were coming home to a stable environment. That was worth everything to me. The truth was, she wasn't handling it well. Her job search hadn't gone as planned either. After being out of the workforce for 8 years, no one was eager to hire her. The alimony payments she got, $2,800 a month, barely covered her bills. Her car, the one I bought her, was sold. She had to downgrade her phone plan, cancel memberships, and even stopped going to the gym. The life she thought she could have was slipping through her fingers. But none of that mattered to me. I had my kids, and I had my freedom. That's all I needed. And then, out of nowhere, I received a text from her. "I know you hate me," it started. "But I want you to know I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not just for what I did, but for how I handled it. I was wrong to blame you. I was wrong to try to hurt you. I'm working on myself." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond with something cutting. Something that would make her feel every bit of pain I had felt. But another part of me, one that had grown stronger over the past month, knew that it wasn't worth it. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Instead, I wrote back, "I hope you mean that for the kids' sake." That was all I could give her. I wasn't going to reopen old wounds. I had moved on, and so had my life. She had her own road to walk, and I wasn't about to hold her hand through it. I sent the message and set the phone down. It felt like the final chapter was being written. The last bit of loose ends finally tied up. But even after everything, there was still a part of me that wondered what the future held. Was I ready to date again? Would I ever trust someone else the way I had trusted her? I wasn't sure. But I didn't need to be sure. I had time. Time to focus on my kids. Time to rebuild my life on my own terms. I was finally free from the weight of the past. From the constant manipulation. From the emotional games. I could look in the mirror now and know that I was doing the right thing. I was doing the best thing for my kids. That was enough. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again.